Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa with news from across the continent. I'm Clarisse Fortuné. Coming up on the show. Donors have pledged nearly $2 billion for Sudan to mark 3 years of a war that has killed tens of thousands and displaced millions. The UN chief says this nightmare must end, while calling the anniversary a tragic milestone in a conflict that has shattered a country of immense promise. Next up, Cameroon after Algeria. Pope Leo continues his African tour. At the start of his visit to Yaoundé, he delivered a strong message urging Cameroon's leaders to examine their conscience and address corruption and human rights abuses. With fish stocks rapidly declining, Ghana is cracking down on overfishing fueled by foreign vessels and destructive practices by creating a vast marine protected zone. But will a 700 square kilometer no fishing area be enough to revive marine life and secure livelihoods? Sudan's bitter civil war has now entered its fourth year with no end in sight to the fighting between the Sudanese military and the paramilitary rapid support forces. The conflict created the world's worst humanitarian crisis. At a special conference in Germany, donors pledged $1.8 billion to support Sudan. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres had earlier urged partners to step up their efforts, declaring that this nightmare must end. Have a listen.
An entire generation of children has been robbed of education, and the consequences are not confined to Sudan. They are destabilizing the wider region. Excellencies, this nightmare must end. That requires unity and urgency. Civilians must be protected. Humanitarian workers must be able to carry out their life-saving work safely and without obstruction. Humanitarian operations must be fully funded. Yet last year, less than 40% of the humanitarian support required was delivered.
And as the military and the RSF continue to fight one another, Solange Mougin takes a look at the devastating toll on civilians.
It is often called the world's worst humanitarian crisis, one that officials say has been largely abandoned. Yet the devastation is staggering in Sudan. 13 million people have had to flee their homes. More than 30 million are in need of humanitarian assistance, or 2 out of 3 Sudanese.
And this year alone, an estimated 4.2 million children across Sudan are expected to suffer from acute malnutrition.
For many, escaping the fighting and the shifting zones of conflict has meant repeatedly leaving everything behind and going without food or livelihoods.
We were in El Fasher when the war happened. The situation was terrible. Either you would find food for your children or they would go without. There are no jobs. The only aid we get is from the World Food Programme.
Aid organizations are pleading for help. The needs far exceed the funding and the donations they receive. They're also often under attack.
It is incredibly dangerous at the moment. We've seen targeting of humanitarian convoys in drone strikes, local aid responders who really remain the sort of heroes of this horrific conflict, who are most of the time the only ones accessing communities in need, are repeatedly targeted as well. So people keep saying those local responders who are hosting soup kitchens, for example, have to stop being targeted by the warring parties.
Human Rights Watch says foreign nations must put more pressure on Sudan's warring military and paramilitary forces to cease attacking AIDS groups. Without urgent action, the number of Sudanese with acute malnutrition, the deadliest form of famine, could soon hit 800,000 people.
Pope Leo XIV continues his 10-day tour across African countries. He is now in Cameroon after a 3-day visit in Algeria, where Pope Leo marked the first visit by a pontiff to the Muslim-majority country. In Cameroon, after Yaoundé and Douala, the Pope is to go to the heart of Cameroon's Anglophone region. Amidst the shadow of political tensions, his presence is being viewed as a potential turning point. And to discuss this landmark visit, Father Henry Chukwu Jeku is with us, and he's a priest of the Catholic Diocese of Newi in Nigeria and currently a missionary in the Diocese of Pontoise here in the Paris region. So, Father, thank you for being with us. So let's go first to Cameroon, where Pope Leo XIV arrived to a turbulent welcome, and he met with President Paul Biya, and he had this to say.
Security is a priority, but it must always be exercised with respect for human rights, by combining rigor and magnanimity with particular attention to the most vulnerable. Authentic peace is born when everyone feels protected, listened to, and respected.
And our team was at the airport where Christians could not contain their joy over seeing and touching the sovereign pontiff. Have a look.
Along the streets of Yaoundé, millions of people turned up to welcome the sovereign pontiff.
I greeted Pope Leo XIV. I shook his hand. He blessed my daughter and gave us a rosary. I'm overjoyed. The Catholic Church is number one.
I came from the outskirts of Yaoundé to welcome the sovereign pontiff, Pope Leo XIV. I saw him and I waved at him and he blessed me. I'm going back very happy and satisfied.
He made a stop over upon the invitation of Head of State Paul Biya and wife Chantal Biya at the Unity Palace, where he interchanged with the Christian community again, as well as the diplomatic corps. In his address to the Head of State and the rest of the government of Cameroon, the Pope addressed himself or described himself as a servant of peace and dialogue, preaching peace. He said the peace that Cameroon needs is not peace that is based on threats, on intimidation and on armaments. He called the kind of peace that Cameroon needs as one that will open hearts and work towards a resolution of the different crises in the country.
Now over to you, Father. First, I want to get your reaction to the Pope's address. That was quite an unusual, direct tone.
Very, very touching that the Pope made his message clear to the president and the leaders in Cameroon. And that is the mission of the church, that is the message of the church. And from onset, since these few days, we have noticed that Pope has remained steadfast in preaching about peace and then reconciliation. Because in a country like Cameroon, where the situation is torn apart, the people are torn apart, people are separated. We have over 600,000 people that are displaced from their homes. People are living in difficult situations. So Pope coming now to make his word clear is to touch the president and other leaders, not just Cameroon, also in other countries around Cameroon in Africa, because the same problem is always showing in one way or the other, where people are marginalized, where people are subjugated, and where people are treated in such a way that it's like they are less human. So he kept on mentioning that they have to recognize that every person has a right, and then that is the voice of the church. Actually.
The voice of the church, which also makes to question the role of the Pope in society.
Yes.
Let's stay in Cameroon. There's also tension, including the Anglophone region, and the Pope's visit has already coincided with a temporary ceasefire in the separatist conflict. Let's have a look.
Words are going to encourage us in the process we have towards peace. So for him to have decided to visit us when we are still in trouble is a very, very good thing for us. And therefore, we are expecting the Holy Father's visit to produce us very good results with regard to our peace process.
a man of the Church of Bamenda. So what does that tell us about the church influence?
Yes, it tells us that the church goes to the hearts of the people, the heart of the troubled nations, the troubled communities. The church does not stand outside. It goes to console people, to meet them in their difficulties, not just to stay maybe at the airport like it was done in one of the countries beside Cameroon, but it goes to meet the people. And it touches me also to recognize the fact that these people, we can say maybe rebels or terrorists, I don't know, but they accepted to drop their weapons. First of all, it is a recognition of the place of the Pope as a spiritual father. If they could do that, it means that these people have consciences. It means that they could be talked to. The leaders of the country can find a way to go to them. It does not mean negotiating, no, but it means that when people are protesting, they have a reason for protesting. What is the country, what are the leaders doing to touch them, to see if it can be made better? So Pope deciding to go to the heart of conflict, it touches and it speaks loud.
So being at the heart, talking about the heart of conflict, do you think this address could also apply and be heard in Nigeria where, you know, especially in the north of the country, there's also tensions with violence arising up these past few weeks?
Yes. I'm from Nigeria.
Because you're from Nigeria,
yes.
exactly.
I stay in Pontoise, where I am serving in parish of Pierre as a parish priest. Now, in Nigeria, as I said, just a few weeks ago, the president, there was a problem in one of the communities in Jos. The president came to and stopped at the airport, and people came to the airport to receive him. It was not really good at the site. So it tells them that a leader is not the one that stays apart from the people. A leader is the one that goes nearer to the people. A leader is the one that is ready to suffer with the people, to serve the people, even in their difficulties. So it is a strong message to the presidents and other leaders around that zone of Africa so that they will step up their game.
Thank you very much, Father. Let's see if that message will be heard.
We are waiting.
Across
we are looking forward.
We'll be waiting. Thank you
looking
very
forward
much.
to that.
Thank you. Now, Ghana is the latest African nation to declare a marine protected area in response to the alarming levels of depletion of the country's fish stock. Overfishing, driven largely by piracy from foreign fishing vessels and destructive fishing methods, have wreaked havoc for coastal communities. A new initiative is barring fishing in an area of 700 square kilometers in the country's southernmost seas. Here's our Ghana correspondent, Justice Baidu.
Ghana's 550-kilometer coastal stretch has now become a regional hotspot for harmful fishing practices like petroling, largely by foreign vessels that deny local artisanal fishermen of their livelihood and drives the cost of fish on local markets up. The decision to designate 700 square kilometers of the country's coastline as a marine protected area has now become a critical lifeline to address this challenge, according to the country's Vice President, Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman.
The protection of this area goes far beyond conserving fish. It secures the ecological foundation on which sustainable fisheries and the communities that depend on them must be built.
This would be the umpteenth time that the government of Ghana is taking steps to address bad fishing practices across several parts of the country's coastline. Many fishermen, while hopeful, remain skeptical that this may change anything.
Our seas are full of Chinese boats. They have destroyed the fishing business.
Around 50% of the country's fish stock has been lost over the last 15 years alone.
Well, that's it for this edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you for watching.